This is Jane Hoffman. I run the podcast now on YouTube. It's called Political Gravity with Suzette, John, Don, Pianke. Suzette, Don, John, and Pianke. There's one caller last week who broke the golden rule of respecting other people's religion. So if that person calls back in a forgiving mode, I will let him back on. But I'm not going to initiate the process. So tonight I'm talking about an outline for federal government and resistance to tax. And I will explain that in full. If Don does not call in the next 7 minutes, then I will call him. And John Yoder is expected to call the show perhaps around 9 o'clock in 30 minutes. It won't be as long as it normally is because Suzette is ill. So I'm going to start right now. Back when in 2003, I believe it was, when the Iraq War was getting off the ground in Baghdad, the city of Berkeley refused to pay their city taxes towards the federal government in resistance to being against the war in Iraq. In other words, they wanted to contribute nothing to a war they did not believe in. In 1968, similar individual acts were done, but as a whole, I don't think there were many places where they might have failed individually to pay their federal taxes, but they did other things like burn draft cards and like escape to Canada. At least 2,000 American men did that. Or they deferred into college if they were smart enough, because I believe in some cases only like the top 10% in colleges were really safe from that. One of those people was Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. So I'm going to play a quick clip of J.D. Vance after I outline my theory of what might happen in the next 3 to 12 months. So for example, publicly, Donald Trump just had an argument with somebody. It was a governor of Maine regarding a sweeping executive order he put through, and the Maine governor said publicly in a meeting at the White House, I think it was, that he may or may not comply with Trump's order. He wasn't specific. And Trump said, well, you're not going to get federal funding then. Well, a lot of things are getting cut off right now. And like, for example, a student I know at the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth, she's worried about federal grants coming through for her program in nursing. And if she doesn't get the federal subsidies, because the tuition's around $30,000 a year, then she will not be able to complete her nursing program. Also, students who have outstanding student loans but are still on time, like they haven't defaulted, they're not able to apply right now for an IDR, which is an income-driven payment program. For some reason, Trump froze that. I think there's other options. But for someone like in my boat who's 64, and I do work full time, but I have other obligations, I can't pay the full amount they're asking, $884 every month. So I'm on a different program. However, I want to state that one aspect of the income-driven payment program is frozen right now. You cannot go on studentaid.gov and renew it. You're supposed to renew it annually. So there's some other options. So I'm going towards teacher public student loan forgiveness. And I'm also going for a situation regarding my eye that causes a minor disability. So the plan is, if you are let's say you're a state governor of a smaller state. Now, I don't know in a bigger state like California, Texas, or New York, if a state that large could pull off stopping all their federal funding going to the government, because they could use the argument that, well, if you're going to cut off certain programs of ours, for example, in New York, the federal government stole 80 million out of the city of New York's budget. They went straight into their bank account and took out all the it was $80,000 worth of hotel vouchers for immigrants. They did it without asking, without warning. So technically the city in New York could say, well, we're going to hold this portion of our federal taxes back because you stole our money. So what the governor would do is he would set up the programs. He would divide them between the ones that he oversees, just the governor himself, their tax collection process. They could hold a portion of their funding that they give to the feds and give it back to the states. Now, if it's a for-profit corporation, they're supposed to pay all their federal taxes, but even for-profit corporations get certain breaks. But if it's a 501c3, like a nonprofit corporation, then they're already federally tax exempt, like the churches. So they're not required to pay taxes. But for those companies, let's say it's a smaller company, maybe with 100 employees, and the leader of the company is totally anti-Trump and they're against totally what he's doing, because right now Trump just slashed thousands of federal jobs that veterans and disabled veterans were doing across the nation. So let's say there was a company, like I'll just pick Duluth, Minnesota. Cirrus, they make airplane parts. So let's say Cirrus hired 50% of their employees were veterans. Let's say they didn't agree with any of Trump's policies. In fact, the policies were hurting their company. So what they would do is they would withhold they would give the employees the full taxes. The only ones they would hold is Medicare and FICA and Social Security, but they wouldn't take any federal taxes out of their company, and they would only pay the state of Minnesota the proportion they normally pay. That way the company could either give those federal funds back to Tim Walz at the state and put it like in a new rejection federal funding pool, and that money could be circulated back to Minnesota state-based programs. I'm just throwing this out there because I see a lot of pundits on MSNBC and even comedians and other networks. All they're doing is complaining about Donald Trump, but they're not taking action. Even Bernie Sanders, him and Elizabeth Warren are making excellent speeches on Instagram, but Bernie's asking for money. Why should I give Bernie Sanders money when he can? I want to see if he can effectively stop Donald Trump at anything he's doing. Like if Bernie Sanders can build a coalition to stop anything that might be legally bound, like Trump going over his job description, overreach, and stopping something like, I'll just give you a few examples. The FAA firing the director right before that plane crash, eliminating randomly and capriciously multiple jobs within the federal government where people had very, very good performance ratings over 5, 10, 15, 20 years. No problem at all. They were all excellent. And then they were given a letter based on your performance. You're no longer allowed to do this job and you're being laid off. And I saw eyewitnesses to this online. There was a federal worker in Yellowstone Park who was a veteran who got A ratings on his performance every year, and he was let go, and he loved his job to death. Like, he loved it. And he was part of the park cleanup, like removing bottles and cans and debris from the park because there's thousands of visitors every year. So what is his what kind of action can he take? Because let's face it, there's not that many jobs in America that he can just go out and get another good paying job. He's going to be stuck working at either an entry level job at a hotel or a fast food, or maybe he has some other level of expertise he can do. But I think it's pretty bad. So it would be one thing if people would be more agreeable with the Trump administration if what they did with Doge initially, because he's only been in office approximately a month. What this is what they could do. They could get a task team, and they could look at each individual federal bureau, like the Department of Education, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Commerce, and do a fact-finding summary of what areas could be narrowed down. Instead, they're going at it arbitrarily, like if you don't show up for work in person by February 26th, there's going to be retribution and the possibility of losing your job. If you don't report by Friday of every week some discrepancies you see at work, or wasteful management, or time management and resource waste, if you don't make those weekly reports, you're under the gutter. So these are the types of things that I think any American that's being very scrutiny, instead of complaining, saying like they're going to slash this, they're going to slash that, then I would be complaining too, because they, but not in the way that I'm just complaining because it happened. I would be more proactive to try to look at ways that I could improve the situation. Apparently, they just got rid of, I'm just going to guess, between 1 and 5,000 brand new IRS hirees that were already in a training. So that's going to create an oversight problem, because there's only like one IRS worker for every 20,000 people. So how about all the people that don't turn in taxes every year? I know people that haven't turned in their taxes for 5 years. One guy said, back when I worked at Thunderbird, he's from Hibbing in the Iron Range. He used to be a drug dealer. He didn't get any of the stimulus taxes because he hasn't filed in over 20 years. Well, when it comes around the time for him to get Social Security, which he has paid in, what if he owes taxes 1 year and he doesn't know it? He's going to get penalized. Now, that's just plain irresponsible. And I don't want to not pay my taxes. I want to pay my taxes. I just don't feel that it's fair that certain elements of government are being eliminated, which are necessary. And with that, I'm going to put some music on. Well, I'm actually going to put a GIF up. You'll see what it is while I call Donald. 1 sec. So I'll be with you guys. I'm still here, but I have to make a phone call. So there's the Wizard of Oz on the stage. I'm going to be calling. Well, let me play this video quick before I call Don, okay? So this is one of J.D. Vance's ideas. Now, one thing I do like about J.D. Vance is he never gets flustered, ever. If a reporter asks aggressive questions, he calmly answers and he explains himself. I'm not saying I'm a huge fan and I'm going to vote for him. I'm just saying that he handles himself.
chunk of the tax base. Do you really think that fiscally conservative Republicans in Congress are going to vote for this?
Well, I think obviously Republicans believe American workers should keep more of their own money. And yes, I think that if we actually, for my part,
over time, no tax on income from Social Security, all of that would wipe out a big chunk of the tax base. Do you really think that fiscally conservative Republicans in Congress are going to vote for this?
well, I think obviously Republicans believe American workers should keep more of their own money. And yes, I think that if we actually balance this out by penalizing some of these companies for manufacturing overseas, I do think that we can get this to balance out in the right way, Margaret, where we're not blowing a hole in the deficit. We're giving workers more of their money. But to your point, we're actually making it easier to make things in the United States of America. Now, you're exactly right. Sometimes it is a little bit cheaper to manufacture overseas, but we have to ask why that is. It's because a lot of these foreign countries use literal slave labor in manufacturing. We should not be allowing slave laborers to benefit from American markets. If you want access to our market, you've got to pay our workers fair wages. That is the Trump agenda.
We're now saying no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on income from Social Security. All of that would wipe out
So I'm going to repeat: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits. I wouldn't think that was a large part of the federal budget, but the pundit was drilling J.D. Vance in the sense that she thinks it's a big chunk of federal income. I think a lot of people would be happy if their overtime wasn't taxed. They usually, a lot of people, they giggle because if they work over 40 hours a week and let's say they put in 12 extra hours that week, they always laugh and say half of it's going to go to the feds. But I think that would be a good idea. I'm not sure about if every restaurant in America didn't tax their tips. To me, that would seem like a bigger chunk of the federal revenue. But at least people, at least Vance is making concrete plans with concrete ideas. I don't feel like Trump is. So with that, I'm going to make this phone call. And luckily, Suzette can't call in tonight, which is a real shame. She's one of our best callers.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic.
I guess he fell asleep. Hi, Don. I've already been doing the show 18 minutes.
All right. I just got off the bathtub. I just got home. It's been a long, long day. So.
Well, we only have to go 15 more minutes.
All right. Well, I'll put on. That's fine.
Okay. Are you dressed?
Of course not.
Okay. Well, let me do talking a few minutes while you get dressed. Put yourself on mute, and just stay on the phone though. Okay.
All right. I don't need to get dressed. Go ahead.
Okay. So just you can talk when you want. I'm gonna do an introduction to you.
No problem.
So okay, I started the show out. I talked about strategies different states can use that are right now certain companies and organizations, 501(c)(3)s are exempt. But certain companies are forced to pay federal taxes. If Trump threatens to remove services to a state, a governor could produce a strategy in which they would refuse to pay federal taxes. And I was just wondering what you thought about that idea.
That's the craziest idea in the world. Even though we are a federalist country and each state has its own, methods of dealing with their own issues, when you're talking about states and state funding, that is the scariest thing for a state to confront.
No, I'm saying they could withhold. They could tell Donald Trump, we're withholding 50% of what we normally send you.
Yeah, and they're going to hold 100% of what they normally send.
Well, do you think it's a good idea, or is it a threat to our society?
It's a threat to our society.
But Donald Trump is threatening some states. For example, the governor of Maine stood up to him the other day in a conference, and and Donald Trump said in front of about 40 other governors, "Well, I'm not going to send you federal funding now that you're bucking me."
Right, and he also said that she wasn't going to make it in the next election, and she just threw her hand out at them, waved them off, and kept on rolling because she knows Maine, and Maine is not going to go red again. Maine is going to stay independent or blue.
I'm surprised you saw that. I don't think that was a big clip in the news. I'm surprised you saw it.
No, I see everything. You're not getting it. You're working hard, making your money, and that's a good thing. But me and some other people are looking at the news very closely, all stations, to make sure that we get the right gist of what they're trying to do. Because not all of what's happening right now is bad. We need to bring some of the people extra waste in our government. We should have been doing that a long time ago.
But we shouldn't do it. For an example would be a farmer in a field. Are you on speaker right now?
I am.
All right, take yourself off speaker, man, because there's too much back noise.
Well, I don't have any background noise. Nobody saying anything.
Okay, anyway, I'm going to tell you something, Don, okay?
Go for it.
A farmer in a field has to cut an acre worth of wheat. He's not going to just go in there with a long metal stick and cut everything in the field. Let's make it corn, because corn's a little different. He's not going to cut every piece of grass in the field. He's only going to take out the corn stalks. So the approach to eliminating the wide federal budget should not be like a wheat and chaff. It shouldn't be like a wheat and chaff thing. It should be pruning, like pruning the field. And
we know that, and that's the problem. That's why he's in trouble, because he's doing it way too quickly. He's slash and burn. So when he finishes with the crop, your hypothetical crop, then he's burning the field. And in a way, that's not a bad thing, because then you're able to refresh your field instead of having it. You have to turn over crops every few years because the soil dies. So in a way, he's doing us a favor right now, and the people don't need to be looking at this negatively. This is going to open up a whole panacea of opportunity for a lot of people.
All right, this is what's gonna happen though. If he's a lot of American veterans work in different departments, like they work at the Department of Interior at public parks. They work in different types of services, like at mental health clinics. A lot of this stuff is getting cut really fast and really bad. There's no way in 4 years, let's say a Democrat gets elected, that they can restore all this.
No, but the thing is that he's already said that people in the military, who are injured or killed are losers. He's already said that he was not going to cut the defense budget, and now he's cutting the defense budget. He's a chronic liar. You and everybody else should know it by now, but if you don't, it's poor you. And this is something that's already played out. We have seen this scene before. We've seen this movie before. We know what he does. We know he lies. We know he cheats, and we know he steals. And that's what's happening. He's going to take all the monies that he's going to save from these people's salaries and throw some of it in the form of a tax cut to the people, and they're going to be just rolling like pigs in the slop, which they are. But then they're going to have an opportunity to get some money back. But like everything, the money that they're going to get is going to be so little that they're not going to be able to make up for what they lost or the time that they weren't paid. And that's going to, put them more in debt because they're going to, of course, think that they can get more and they're going to spend more, and it's going to be an ugly spiral like it always is. So, we've seen this cyclical movie before.
All right, I have a question though. Let's say every time I talk, it's crackly.
I don't know what it is. Your phone is the one that.
Okay, I'm gonna take you off speaker while I'm talking. It might help.
Okay.
Every time that, let's say he's already eliminated 30,000 jobs just right in the DC, Northern Virginia area. So all those people who had specified jobs that they're not going to find, it's not like they're going to go back to Iowa, Minnesota, or Colorado and find a like-minded job. They're going to have to move. They're going to have to go to another part of the country to maybe do something else. It's going to cost money to move. They might get unemployment for a while because Donald Trump didn't think of that either. All the burden on the states that are going to have to pay for their unemployment. And then let's say they're moving from a $300,000 house in Arlington, Virginia to a $200,000 house in Muncie, Indiana. Like, this is going to change people's whole lives.
You're $150,000 to $200,000 short of what your housing estimates are. Go ahead.
What I'm saying is that it's going to cause upheaval. It's going to piss people off. And people who might have been a Trump supporter now will never be the rest of his term.
Didn't you hear him and his new press secretary, I forgot his name, they all are saying, and the senators who are behind them too, that this has to hurt. There is going to be a term of hurt. So that he's already said that many times. His other supporters have said that. If you look at anything, he said right now it's going to hurt. So that means we're going to have to buckle up for the next probably 6 months and adjust to a whole new fiscal scheme. And then after that, some of these cuts, we should know what's happening because people. There's a work from home that they can get to. There are other jobs that are in private practice, private sector that could use their expertise. So there are, these people who are getting fired, woe is them because, they may not have no job, but they're going to get something. And they're going to be furloughed right now, most of them until September. So this is not an immediate thing with them losing their salary.
Well, people thought that was stupid too because that costs a lot of money. Let's say there's a organic scientist in I'm gonna take it off speaker a second. Let's say there's an organic scientist in the Department of Agriculture. I actually know someone who works for the Department of Agriculture. This person is a master specialist in the study of South American plants, and they're trying to implant some of it in American soil. Why should we pay their full salary till September if they're not even working?
Is he on a TV visa or is he?
No, I didn't. This is a fake scenario, but I know a girl from White Bear Lake, Minnesota. She's about 31. She works for the Department of Agriculture.
Well, she's an American citizen. She's just gonna have to find a job that is going to.
She didn't get laid off yet. I was making up a scenario if another person did.
it doesn't matter who it is. They're going to have to find a job temporarily because more than likely, most of them are going to get their jobs back. And
I don't believe that.
What?
I don't believe that.
You don't believe a lot of things. You don't believe in freedom either, but that's another
That's
story.
not true.
Oh, honey. With the way that you went with Bianchi and John and everybody, all those people are in Sky.
I hate to say it, but you're not on speaker anymore until you change the subject. First of all,
These people have they're already have their lives.
I would. Could I say something to you and then you can respond?
Go ahead.
First of all, we were having a conversation last week with Bianchi, and we were talking about the Gaza Strip, and Suzette and I both brought up the historical. Suzette brought it up first, the Balfour Declaration, when the Israelis were given like a document from England in order to move back to the Holy Land. We were talking about the history of the Philistines, aka Palestinians, and then we talked about how the religious doctrine of people of the book, the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible played into that concept of what their right to homeland is. Bianchi insulted us by saying that no religious historical relevance applies to that area. That's the biggest that's just like total buffoonness. Like that's like saying that America and freedom are not simultaneous. Then you haven't been on private. John and I have done our forgiveness. We talked on the phone an hour. But there were times in his Kool-Aid drinking career where he told me that I could not root for the Kansas City Chiefs because Taylor Swift is dating Travis Kelce and she doesn't worship God, she worships Satan. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, but I'm saying all you people are inculcated with this ideology of fear of what if this
I don't have fear.
It's complete fear of life and what is going to happen in the afterlife. We cannot control those things. Those are things that are not something that.
Okay, I don't spend. You have me wrong. I'll give you an example, Don. I know I'm going to heaven. I'm in a 12-step program.
Who says there is heaven?
Me and the Christians.
Those are fucked up.
Okay, Don is off the air because he's criticizing heaven. I'm sorry, Don, but you're off the air. I don't have time for people who are very ignorant with religion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try calling John now. I'm going to place, just a minute, I have to call John. You are no longer on the air because you said the F word at least 7 times. Everybody knows there's a heaven. Anyone who reads the New Testament. You have the right to your own opinion, but I'm not going to be sworn at. Good night. I'm calling John now to see if he can be in the show. John's walking the dog, so I'm calling Bianca.
The wireless customer you are calling is not available. Please try again later.
Okay, I'm just gonna wrap the show up then. So tonight's topic was about how states can federally resist Donald Trump's new agenda because it's causing the consistency of federal services is not being issued, and it's being thwarted by Donald Trump. So they have alternatives by refusing to pay federal taxes into the federal coffer. I am not able to get a hold of John is dog walking, and I might create another show later when he's able to talk. But Don lost his chance to be on the show. And really, the only reasonable host I have right now cohesively is Wade and Suzette. And Wade is an educator like me. I worked in a middle school today, and I'm not able to always have him on the show. So with that, I'm going to end the show. Good night.